In the quiet village of Hollowbrook, where the mist never lifted from the cobbled streets, lived an old woman named Agatha Moore. Her house stood at the very edge of the village, small, crooked, and wrapped in ivy so thick it looked like the forest was swallowing it whole. Every morning, smoke rose from her chimney, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread. To the villagers, she was a saint. Poor families knocked at her door for food, and Agatha never turned anyone away. She would smile, her wrinkled face glowing in the firelight, and whisper prayers as she handed them warm loaves and hearty stew. But none of them knew that behind her kindness hid a hunger far darker than poverty itself. For in her cellar, beneath the comforting smell of soup and herbs, were chains, bones, and a cauldron blackened by something that wasn't broth. Agatha's meals were a ritual, an offering to something ancient that had promised her youth once more. But to feed it, she needed flesh. And so, the old woman who fed the hungry was feeding something else too. As the weeks passed, whispers began spreading through Hollowbrook. Beggars came to Agatha's door but never seemed to be seen again. First, no one noticed. The poor often wandered, sometimes leaving in the night. But when Martha, a young mother of two, went to fetch stew for her sick child and never returned, unease began to crawl through the village. The priest spoke kindly, insisting she had gone to a distant town. Yet her children swore they heard her voice that night, calling faintly from the woods near Agatha's house. Agatha, as always, appeared heartbroken. She prayed loudly in church, her cracked voice trembling as she spoke of evil spirits and cursed lands. No one suspected her. How could they? She was their savior, the one who kept them from starvation. And yet, beneath her floorboards, Martha's shawl still lay soaked in blood. At night, Agatha would sit by her cauldron, watching the dark liquid bubble. Shadows danced on the walls, taking shapes that looked almost human. A whisper rose from the steam, ancient and cold. "Feed me again." Agatha nodded slowly. The next day, she baked more bread. One rainy evening, a stranger arrived in Hollowbrook. He wore a long, tattered coat and carried a small satchel that jingled with metal tools. His name was Elias Crow, a wandering healer, or so he claimed. He had the kind of eyes that seemed to see through lies, through souls even. The villagers welcomed him, desperate for medicine and hope. Agatha, however, did not. When he knocked on her door, she stood in silence, her pale eyes fixed on his reflection in the rain-smeared window. Elias smiled gently and said, "They tell me you care for the poor, madam. That's a rare kindness these days." Agatha's voice cracked like dry wood. "Kindness has a price, young man. You'd best remember that." He nodded slowly, sensing the unease in her tone. Still, she invited him in. Inside, her home smelled of rosemary and smoke, but beneath that sweetness lingered a faint stench of rot. Elias's eyes drifted toward a locked door near the hearth. "A root cellar?" he asked. Agatha's hand trembled slightly as she poured him tea. "Just where I keep old memories." That night, Elias stayed in the inn. He told the innkeeper that Agatha's eyes were not those of a kind soul. They were eyes of someone who'd bargained with something she shouldn't have. The innkeeper crossed himself and whispered, "Then God help us all." A week later came the Feast of the Moon, a night when the villagers gathered to celebrate the harvest. Agatha baked pies, stews, and loaves enough to feed everyone. The aroma filled the village square, drawing laughter and song. But Elias noticed something strange. The food shimmered faintly under the moonlight, as though dusted with silver. He watched as the poor devoured it hungrily. Hours later, their laughter turned to screams. One by one, they clutched their stomachs, collapsing in agony. Their veins turned black as if ink was spreading beneath their skin. Elias rushed to help, but Agatha's voice sliced through the chaos. "Don't interfere. They belong to me." Her frail body stood tall, her face illuminated by the blood-red moon. Around her feet, the dying villagers twitched and fell silent. Then, from the ground, shadows rose, shapes of hungry spirits feeding on the fallen. Elias stared in horror. He saw now that the old woman's reflection had no face at all. He fled into the woods as her laughter followed him, dry and hollow like dead leaves whispering in the wind. Elias returned at dawn, determined to uncover the truth. He crept into Agatha's house, the door creaking like a dying breath. The smell hit him first, a thick, sweet rot that clung to his throat. Down the stairs he went, candle trembling in hand. Beneath the house, he found a chamber carved from stone, walls lined with bones. At the center stood the black cauldron, bubbling though no fire burned beneath it. Around it lay the remains of those who'd vanished, their faces twisted in silent screams. Agatha's voice came from the shadows, calm and cold. "You shouldn't have come back, healer." She stepped forward, her skin stretched thin, her eyes burning with inhuman hunger. Elias lifted a silver cross, but it melted in his hand. "What are you?" he whispered. Agatha smiled. "The price of kindness, collected." The ground shook, and the cauldron's contents rose like smoke, forming faces that screamed in agony. Elias realized then, Agatha no longer served the creature. She was the creature. Elias returned that night, clutching a flask of holy water and a torch wrapped in oil-soaked cloth. He moved through the fog like a ghost himself, the air heavy with the scent of decay and the faint echoes of laughter from somewhere deep within the forest. The moon hung low and red, like a bleeding wound in the sky. When he reached Agatha's crooked house, he could see movement through the windows, shadows that swayed and twisted, though no one else should have been inside. He forced the door open and shouted her name. Silence answered him. The fire in the hearth burned blue, and on the walls hung strange symbols drawn in something dark and glistening. Beneath his feet, a dull thudding came from below, like the beating of a giant heart. Elias poured the holy water across the floor and threw the torch into the center of the room. The fire roared to life, devouring the wood and the symbols alike. For a moment it seemed to work. The whispers stopped, the air grew still. But then, from the flames, Agatha's voice rose, deep and echoing. "Fire cannot cleanse what feeds on the soul." The house groaned, the walls bleeding black sap. The floorboards split open, revealing dozens of pale, skeletal hands clawing from below. Elias stumbled back, choking on the smoke and screams. He fled again, but as he turned, he saw her standing in the fire, untouched, her eyes like burning coals. She smiled, and the flames bowed to her. Days passed, and the village grew silent. No one dared to visit Agatha's house, but Elias could not rest. In the church archives, he uncovered an old book bound in flayed leather, the Grimoire of Ashen Saints. Within its pages, he found her name written centuries ago. Agatha Moore, listed among the servants of the Devourer, a cult that had vanished after consuming entire villages in 1621. The cult believed that through acts of false charity, they could feed a being born of hunger itself. Elias realized the truth. Agatha had never been human for a very long time. She was the last remnant of that cult, a vessel for the creature that promised endless life through sacrifice. He turned the final page. A sketch stared back at him. Agatha, unchanged, standing beside her black cauldron. Beneath it was written in ink that looked like blood. "When the last beggar is fed, the devourer shall walk again." Elias knew then what must be done. He had to starve the hunger she served. But to do that, he would have to destroy her vessel, her body. Armed with salt, iron, and the last few drops of holy water, Elias ventured once more to Agatha's house. The sky above Hollowbrook was bruised purple, thunder crawling like veins through the clouds. The house waited silent, watching. Inside, the air was colder than death. The cauldron still bubbled, but now it breathed, exhaling fog with each pulse. On the table lay pieces of half-eaten bread, and beside them, small bones. Elias whispered a prayer and drew a circle of salt. The moment he stepped inside it, the shadows shifted. Faces formed in the dark, mouths moving in silent screams. Agatha's voice came from the staircase, soft yet filled with malice. "You can't stop hunger, boy. It's older than God." She descended slowly, her figure warping, flesh dripping like wax. Her smile widened beyond human shape. Elias raised a blade of iron and shouted, "Then let it starve!" He drove the blade through her heart. A scream shook the earth, high, shrill, endless. The cauldron cracked, spilling a flood of black fire that devoured the walls. Agatha fell, her body turning to ash. But from the ashes, something moved, something still alive. The ashes began to stir. At first, Elias thought it was just the wind. But then the black dust gathered, swirling upward, forming the outline of a human shape. From within it came whispers, thousands of voices, all begging, all crying, all starving. They weren't echoes. They were the souls Agatha had fed. And now, freed from her vessel, they had no body, no rest, only hunger. The walls of the house twisted and pulsed like veins. The symbols carved into the wood ignited with a red glow, forming a circle beneath Elias's feet. He tried to escape, but his legs felt heavy, sinking as if the floor were melting into tar. The air became thick, tasting of iron and rot. In front of him, the figure of Agatha began to reform. Taller, thinner, her face stretched into something monstrous. Her eyes were voids that devoured light. "You freed me," she said, her voice echoing like 1,000 mouths speaking at once. "Now they will feast." The floor cracked open, and from beneath rose the remnants of those she had killed. Spectral forms crawling on skeletal limbs, their mouths gaping wide. They reached for Elias, pulling him toward the cauldron that now glowed with blood-red fire. He fought, slashing with his iron blade, chanting the verses from the grimoire. Each word burned the air, each breath tore at his lungs. Then silence, a sudden stillness that pressed against his skull. Agatha stopped moving. The souls paused, hanging midair. Elias took one step forward and hurled the last of his holy water into the cauldron. The explosion that followed was like thunder inside the bones of the earth. The fire turned white, blinding, purifying, consuming everything it touched. Agatha screamed, her form unraveling like smoke in sunlight. The souls shrieked and scattered into light, dissolving one by one. The house collapsed in on itself, swallowed by the blinding radiance. And when the light faded, there was only silence, and Elias, unconscious among the ashes. When Elias awoke, dawn was breaking. The house was gone. Only scorched earth remained, the air still humming with faint energy. He staggered to his feet, every bone aching, his eyes burning from smoke. The forest was quiet again, almost peaceful. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something glinting among the ashes. A small piece of metal, Agatha's locket. Inside it was a photograph, impossibly old, showing a young woman holding a child. The woman's smile was kind, human. Elias felt a pang of pity. Perhaps once, long before the hunger, she had truly been someone good. He closed the locket and buried it beneath a stone. But as he walked away, he heard a faint whisper carried by the wind. A woman's voice, soft, almost gentle. "Kindness never dies. It only hungers." Elias froze. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. He turned, and for a moment, he thought he saw her standing among the trees, pale and still, her eyes watching him through the mist. That night, miles away, in another village, an old woman knocked on a stranger's door. Her smile was warm. Her basket smelled of bread. The following week, strange tales began to spread across the neighboring villages. People whispered about a kind old woman with a crooked back and cloudy eyes who had started visiting the poor again. She offered warm bread, stew, and a smile so gentle it could melt the hardest heart. No one knew her name, but the smell of herbs and ashes lingered wherever she went. In a small village called Bramble's End, a mother named Clara accepted the old woman's meal. Her children had been starving for days, and kindness seemed like salvation. The woman's bread was sweet, soft, almost glowing under the candlelight. But that night, the children began to scream. Their bellies swelled, their skin blistered, and before dawn, Clara's house was silent. By morning, the villagers found her rocking beside their bodies, murmuring nonsense, her eyes empty. In the corner of the room lay a basket of uneaten bread, and inside it, small black beetles writhing in the dough. Some said it was a curse. Others said the old woman was just a story. But those who smelled herbs and smoke at their windows began locking their doors tight at night. Rumors turned into fear, and fear became obsession. Priests were summoned, charms hung over doors, and fires burned all night to keep the dark away. Yet, one by one, more homes went silent. Livestock were found rotting in their pens. Wells turned foul. Children disappeared. A young priest named Father Rowan rode into Bramble's End after hearing the stories. He was brave, curious, too much for his own good. He questioned Clara, who now sat in the chapel's corner, muttering to herself. When he mentioned the old woman, her lips trembled and she whispered, "She said she feeds the hungry, and I was so hungry." That night, Father Rowan stayed in the chapel, candle in hand. Near midnight, he heard a knock, gentle, repetitive. He opened the door to find an old woman, her shawl soaked from the rain, holding a basket. "For the weary and the holy," she said kindly. By dawn, the chapel was aflame. When the villagers came running, they found nothing inside but charred wood and a smell of herbs and burnt flesh. By the end of that month, 5 villages had burned. Those who survived spoke of an old woman moving through the fog, her basket steaming, her voice like a hymn. Wherever she went, kindness preceded death. In one village, a blacksmith named Gareth refused her food, calling her a witch. That night, his forge exploded. The next morning, his body was found among the ashes, but his mouth was sewn shut with what looked like human hair. The people began to flee their homes, but some stayed, believing charity might protect them. A foolish mistake. One evening, an entire family of 7 was found at their dinner table, bowls untouched, faces twisted in terror. Their food had turned to ash in their hands. And in the silence of those dead towns, the same smell lingered, herbs, ash, and something faintly sweet. A man named Jonathan Crane, a scholar of folklore and forbidden texts, arrived to document the kind woman of the north. He had read Elias's writings from decades past and believed the spirit of Agatha Moore had returned. He carried charms, salt, and a vial of sanctified oil. The villagers called him mad, but desperation breeds faith. He spent his nights collecting testimony, trembling accounts of laughter at windows, of bread left on doorsteps, and of dreams filled with the smell of herbs. Jonathan soon realized the pattern. Every village Agatha visited lay near the river's path, the same one that once flowed beside her burned-down home. Something had tethered her spirit to its waters. He set out to find the ruins of that house, hoping to end what Elias began. Jonathan found it after 3 days of wandering, a hollow clearing surrounded by twisted trees. The ground was scorched, but beneath the ash, he found fragments of wood, nails, and a single stone hearth blackened with age. The air was thick with the smell of herbs and rot. He built a small camp beside the ruins and waited. As the sun fell, the forest grew unnaturally still. No wind, no sound, just a faint creaking, like breathing. The ground shifted beneath him. He stepped back, and something pale rose from the ashes. It was a hand, then another, and then, from beneath the earth, the bent figure of an old woman, her shawl in tatters, her face smiling wide. "Kindness must continue," she whispered. "And you, dear boy, look so hungry." As the bodies continued to pile up, fear consumed the hearts of everyone in the village. Families locked their doors long before nightfall, and the once lively town square became an empty echo of what it had been. People began whispering about curses and demons, convinced that the old woman was no ordinary human. Some claimed to see shadows moving inside her home long after she had gone to sleep. Others swore they could hear faint screams drifting through the cold night air. A small group of brave men decided to confront her once and for all, armed with torches and prayer books. They waited until sunset, then surrounded her house. But when they pushed the door open, the old woman was gone. In her place, the room was filled with rotting food and the smell of death. The men found a trapdoor beneath the kitchen floor, leading into darkness. What they saw below would scar them forever. Beneath the floor lay a narrow tunnel lit by flickering candles. The walls were lined with bones, human bones, and at the center stood a crude wooden altar covered with dried blood. On it lay charms made from hair, teeth, and tiny dolls resembling villagers. There were names carved into the wood, including that of every person who had died mysteriously over the past year. But the most chilling part was a large iron pot still warm to the touch, filled with a dark, sticky substance. It didn't take long for them to realize what it was: the remnants of her victims. The men fled in horror, their screams echoing through the tunnels. But one of them swore he heard laughter behind him, soft, wheezing, and unmistakably hers. The men told their story to the priest, who declared the place cursed and demanded it be burned to the ground. They gathered the villagers, and together they set the house ablaze. Flames rose high into the black sky, and for a moment, they felt the nightmare was finally over. But 3 nights later, one of the men who had entered the house was found dead in his bed, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in terror. Then another followed, and another. By the end of the week, all who had entered that cellar were gone. Only ashes and whispers remained. The priest ordered the ground sealed and blessed. Yet some say they still see the old woman's shadow wandering near the ruins, carrying a bowl, as if still searching for her next meal. Years passed, and the story became a legend whispered by parents to scare their children. The land where the house once stood was avoided by all. Even the bravest hunters refused to cross it. But strange things began happening again. Stray dogs disappearing, strange symbols appearing on doors, and people falling mysteriously ill after accepting food from strangers. It was as if her spirit had found new ways to feed. Some believed she had possessed another body, continuing her grim work. Others thought she had become something far worse, a hungry spirit, feeding on the fear she left behind. Today, the tale of the Widow's Feast remains one of the darkest legends in the region. Travelers are warned never to accept food from strangers in the surrounding villages, especially from elderly women living alone. Local folklore says that on cold nights, if you follow the scent of freshly baked bread through the fog, you might find her waiting, smiling kindly, ladling soup into a bowl. But if you take a single bite, your soul will never rest again. Her feast continues, unseen and eternal, feeding not just on flesh, but on the fear that never dies. They say the smell of her stew still lingers in the wind whenever someone walks near the ruins of her house. And sometimes, you can hear faint whispers calling your name just before the night turns silent again. Evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes, it hides behind a smile and a bowl of warm soup. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true horror tales that blur the line between kindness and darkness.